DCT Talks.
When it comes to investing, the philosophy is simply a three-step process. Maximize returns, minimize risk, and always look at the numbers first.
And on this episode of DCT Talks, I'm here with the founder of DCT Capital, Joseph Jackson, a serial entrepreneur with over 30 years of experience in the real estate market. I consider him a friend and a mentor, so you're definitely going to love this episode. This happens to be one of our initial episodes that we did in order to record for his book. Well, I hope you love it. Have a great day.
People frequently ask me, how do you get started in business, and what should they do? And now, after years of being in business, I realize the key is just you have to identify a problem that you're going to solve, and that ultimately is how you get paid. For me, with construction, you go through the process and you identify your stakeholders. So there's the person who's selling the property, there's the person who's going to ultimately buy the property, there's the architect, the subcontractors who are going to build that property for you, there's the bank who's going to fund it or your funding source, or there are investors who are your funding source. And so all of these people come to you because they have a need. For instance, when you don't typically go to an attorney unless you have a legal problem. You have something that you want them to do, and then when you go to them, you'll pay them what they want because they're going to solve a problem for you. They're going to provide a service for you. The same thing if you have a water leak at your house, you wake up in the middle of the night and you hear this drip, drip, drip going in your house, and you find that you have a leak, you'll call a plumber, and you'll pay them almost whatever they ask because you want them to solve that problem. And so your primary concern at that point is to get your problem solved and not how much they're going to charge you to solve that problem. And so if you turn that around, you can use that in your life and realize that if you put yourself in a position to solve problems, then you can also put yourself in a position to get paid. So the more problems you solve, the more people you can solve problems for, the more people who are going to be ultimately your customers. And so as I talk to my team, I let them understand that we have internal customers and external customers. And the more we treat them as clients, and the more we look to see how can we solve their problem, how can we solve what's challenging them, the more effective, the more reliable, the more actually dependent they become on you when you do that. So as you go through this process, I'm going to take you through a normal investment vehicle. The first thing is I'm talking to clients, and I understand that you can't work at your feet. You can't do things in an ideal world. You do things ahead of time as opposed to right now. Right now is the hardest place to make money. If you say, Hugo, I need to make $10,000 today, you'd be hard pressed to give me an answer, especially a legal answer. If I said, Hugo, I need to make $10,000 next year, you'd give me a number of ways to do it. So the further out you can go and you keep your challenges, the better off you are. So when I set up the business, when I set up how I function, I try to function out a distance away, but I function with the understanding that I have to solve somebody's problem. So the first thing is identify, in order to build a house, I've got to have some money. I've got to have an investor. So I start out to solve an investor's problem. What does the investor need, or a bank, whichever way you want to go. Let's talk about an investor. They typically, if they have the money, they're looking for someplace safe to put it, something that they understand and or respect in terms of commodities. So in my industry, it's real estate, so that makes it easy because you got 50 shows on TV about flip that house and do this, that, and the other. So it's not a hard sell on that. But the problem that they have is they have the money without the expertise to build the house. So my job for that customer is not to separate him from his money, but to show him that I am a safe and reliable place to invest their money. I show them that I know how to build. I can maintain a schedule. I can create value with the schedule. So the problem that I solve for that investor right off is I give him a place to park his money. When you go through the construction, the challenge that I've had with my team has been getting them to understand the power in the position that they have and how they need to use it. You have to use your power judiciously, of course. You need to be a benevolent dictatorship, so to speak. So you hire subcontractors to build your house. In this industry, when you hire a subcontractor, you have the guy that's high priced. They have, say, excellent quality work. They have the capital behind them to market themselves effectively. They have an established business with processes and procedures that are organized, and they're the ones that are going to be at the top of the food chain, the ones that command the greatest dollar value for their skill set. And then the opposite end of the spectrum is the person who may have a language impediment, or may not have a good way of marketing themselves. They may not manage their time well, but they still produce a good quality product, but they don't make much money because they don't have all those other components that make you a well-rounded business. And so what I try to do is, quality being the most important component of selecting a vendor, is I find the ones that I can solve a problem for. The ones that do the job well. If sub 1 does a sheetrock job and sub 2 does the same job, you should be able to tell the difference in the quality of the sheetrock hanging, taping, and floating. Where you're going to find the difference is how they handle their responsibilities. So I'm looking for that guy that can do an excellent job, but maybe he doesn't manage his money well, so he doesn't have the resources to go buy $4,000 worth of sheetrock to stage his job. So one, that's a problem that I can solve for him, because I can bring those resources to the table to solve that problem. And then it's the guy who can't get a lot of work because he doesn't manage his time well. He'll start this part of the house, and let's say he starts off hanging sheetrock in the kitchen, going to sheetrock a whole house. Starts off hanging sheetrock in the kitchen, and he hangs the ceiling in the kitchen. He hangs the walls in the bathroom. He hangs the ceiling and 2 walls in the bedroom, and he's kind of all over the house. Well, as he goes through 1 week or 2 weeks of hanging sheetrock in that fashion, the sheetrock still can be hung at the end of the day properly with good craftsmanship. But it took him 2 weeks to do a job that if he had started in one room and finished that room completely and moved to the next room, he may have finished the whole job. So the challenge that person typically gets into is getting paid. If a client is only going to pay for it, a bank especially, is only going to allow for a financial draw based on work complete. So if there's nothing that's actually complete, if everything is actually started, there's no interim payments. He can't get paid until he completely finishes that job. If he goes about it in a manner that's more concise, and he does the east side of the house first and then the west side of the house, but he does everything complete, he can get 3 days into that job and say, okay, well, I've done these things, let me get a partial payment, and I'll go to the next thing and let me get a partial payment. A better example of that was one time we were working on a project, and I was telling one of my project managers that they need to manage how the carpenter was going to go in and install the baseboard and cabinetry. I told him, start in all the rooms that don't have, start in everything other than the kitchen and the bathroom. Then do his bathroom, and then get the kitchen, because the kitchen, with the amount of cabinetry in the kitchen, was going to take at least 3 weeks to do all the cabinetry and trim and stuff in the kitchen. If he did the baseboards in the other rooms, then that work would have been finished in, say, 1 week. So the guy's going to be in the job for a month. If he if he did the other rooms first, then that allowed me to get, while he's working in the kitchen, that allowed me to get my painter to go in there and start prepping and priming the entire rest of the house while he was getting the kitchen going. Doing it in the reverse order, where he did the kitchen first meant that my painter now could not start So now I only have one trade working instead of two trades working, and it was going to still take my painter 2 weeks of prep work before they could get finished. So the sequencing of it was important. And so what I realized was the subs that we were using gave us excellent value, but what they were lacking was either the project management skills or the financial resources to complete that job on time. And I realized the value that we bring to the table, what we get paid for in the transaction, because as a construction company or as a project management company, we don't actually swing the hammer. We're not the ones actually hanging the sheetrock and laying the carpet or painting the walls. We're simply managing managing the resources. And so we have a choice. We can go to the person who, back in the prior example, is the premium contractor in their group, where you're going to have a very high price to pay, or you can go to a skilled contractor that has some management issues or some planning issues, and they need help. And so that's the problem that we're solving. We're solving their efficiency. We're solving their planning. We're giving them that tool so they can complete the job properly, and we assist them in getting paid. And as such, we make more money because we're using a sub that requires less, because they're not bringing the whole kit and caboodle to the job. They're only bringing the skill to the job, and we're bringing the project management expertise or the money to the project. So that's, I guess, kind of how we pick and choose our subcontractors. But the other thing is, when you're looking at your renovation, looking at a house, it's the same thing. You have a house that has deferred maintenance, things that haven't been cured, or functional obsolescence is really the biggest thing. Where you go into a neighborhood, the neighborhood itself has the appropriate infrastructure. It has proximity to schools or proximity to stores. It has proximity to downtown or entertainment, sporting events, cultural centers. But the houses in the area where we are typically 50, 60-year-old houses. And so the bedrooms at the time, and I don't really understand what the thought process was, but you'd go from one bedroom to another straight through the bedrooms. You didn't have a common hallway, then all the doors open up off of that hallway, as most houses do now. You literally walk from one room to the next room to the next room through the bedrooms. So that functional obsolescence is what we solve for, and solving that problem and turning that house from one with that kind of functional obsolescence, or maybe 3 bedrooms or even 4 bedrooms with 1 bathroom, or the master bedroom is small and it's upstairs. So we'll come in and we'll look at that house, and we will design a floor plan that's more functional. We'll add a master suite with a more common bedroom closet layout for the master. We will create hallways internally, maybe by deleting a bathroom in one place and using that as a common hallway, and then adding some additional bathrooms to the structure in other places, and thus making that house have a greater appeal, because it's more consistent with today's taste in architecture and usability. And so that's, again, a place where we are solving a problem. We're taking a house from being functionally obsolescent to one where it's really nice, it's really modern. We can bring in new wiring, plumbing, air conditioning, so that all the components in the house, people get an older property and have a brand new facade and usability. And so we look for those kind of opportunities to make money. But it's not just in real estate. You can do that really in any business, but what you have to identify is, what are the problems that your client has? What problems are you going to solve for them? Where are they short? Where they need your help? And if you can identify that, it works. I deal with a title company, and the title company that I've used them for several years, and it's not because they're necessarily the best, because again, it's the same thing. If you get title insurance, it's title insurance for the most part. And in 30 years, I've never had to rely on it, but you always have to buy it. And so I got a title company that I understand where their shortcomings are. I understand what they do well and what they don't. And the reason it works for me is because I go into the deal knowing I'm going to solve this problem for them. So one of the problems is they have to get paid. But two, again, it's from an organization standpoint, the customer service. They're staffed with the majority of people on their staff just have a job. They're just over broke. They're not there. It's not their career path. It's not something that they're passionate about. So the owner of the title company is trying to get, or the escrow officer is trying to get a lot of work done through these people. So maybe it's a hiring issue for her or that kind of thing. I haven't really delved into it that far, but one of the things I know is I can use her team and give them instructions and manage their activities as it relates to my files, meaning I'll call them and say, did you order my survey? Make sure you order the survey, put a rush on this. Call the plant, make sure the title commitment is coming back on this property. Have you talked to the buyer? Recently I had a buyer that was out of town and they were telling me, the buyer's not ready to close yet. He said he can't get back to town for a few weeks. And I knew that that's not what the case was. But that's how they do business across the board. They're looking for an excuse not to have to do their job that day. The problem that I was solving was for the escrow officer who runs the title company. If I can get you paid more frequently, I'm going to be a valued customer of yours. You're going to move mountains for me if you can to make me happy. So I use her staff and I work with what I understand to be their inefficiencies to get what I want. It means that I have to call the shots. I have to decide when I use that particular title company, I've got to put on my calendar, make sure they order your survey at this time, make sure they order your appraisal, make sure that the title commitment is back. If they have airship affidavits that they have to do, I make sure they're calling the right people and that they're doing their job. I serve as that prompt. At the end of the day, I get what I want. I get closing when I wanted to close. I get the projects done the way I need them done. I let her staff take credit for doing their job. I don't go in and say, hey, I did this for your team. But when I'm asking for it, they all get to celebrate in the payday of getting what I was asking to get accomplished. So, they'll frequently say, Joseph, you push, you always want everything right now. But they don't complain because, when they do complain, it's tongue in cheek, because at the end of the day, we're going to close. But it's always my responsibility to make sure all the work gets done. You can delegate, but you can't abdicate your responsibilities. And at the end of the day, it's me understanding where the issues are that allows me to use almost any service and get paid or get to the finish line, because it's part of that process of identifying who you're working with, what you're doing with them, and what their needs are. And as long as you are solving their needs, because I guess that's something else that's important, is getting paid is not always getting currency. Getting paid can also just be getting your end result, getting your objective met, because that's ultimately a form of payment, is when somebody provides the final product that you need to move on to the next step. So that part of understanding who you're dealing with and what their needs are. For instance, so my internal staff, you've got different personality types, you have different need systems, and they have different backgrounds, different things that impede them from ultimately achieving all that they state that they want for themselves. And you have to endeavor to understand that playing ground, where are they? You have to kind of meet them on their level. I frequently tell people are where they are for a reason. If you have all this talent and you are functioning or living on a financial plane that's lower than what your talent would appear like, or it would appear to, you have to say, what is their problem? Why can't they function at their capacity? And so you go in and you may determine that, okay, this person has a self-esteem issue. They've been in a combative relationship or and not necessarily abusive, but just not a good one where they've been supported. and maybe they made some mistakes or stumbled, as we all do from time to time, and they were chided for that or berated for stumbling. And so now they don't have the confidence to execute. And so they guess or they second guess themselves on a regular basis. Can you create a methodology where they can still be functional? For me, business is not just the currency part of it. I think there's a social aspect to building a company or building a business. If you can create an environment that people don't want to leave, where they want to work with you, they want to be a part of what you're doing and where you're going, they catch the vision, not because they want to make you wealthy personally, but because they see growth for themselves in working with you. They see that you challenge them to be a better them, that you challenge them to overcome their issues, that you challenge them to solve their own problems, their own aspects in their life. And you can take the challenges that they have in doing a job and help them relate it to challenges that they have with their spouse or with their children, and how to look past it. So I have a friend who's worked with me for some years, and we frequently have conversations either before work or after work, and I use the work as a metaphor. You have to always, you're always selling. Everything is always being sold. And so when you're dealing with your children, you have to use every opportunity to sell them on you're the authority. You have the correct answer. You have what you're telling them is going to work out best. And it's your responsibility to point that out along the way, so that when the time comes and they are challenged with making a decision, they go back and think, what did Daddy say, or what were those lessons that you were teaching? So you're kind of always selling them on how to solve their own problems, how to look at a circumstance and assess it for. Here are the needs, and where are the issues? How do I get what I want? Where are the problems that aren't being solved? Let me solve those. So if it's specific for an individual and that I need this type of production out of person A, then I'm looking at person A and I'm looking, okay, what's their skill set? And then looking beyond their skill set, where are they weak? Where are their flaws? And how will their flaws potentially show up in my work product that in a manner that's not productive for me? And I try to solve for those issues, and that will typically or ultimately get me paid. So I'm looking at, hey, this person is chronically late to appointments. So if I've got to use that person for something, do I set them up with an Uber? Do I call them ahead of time? Do I call them the day before? I talk to the project managers, and I tell them it's not done till it's done. So I may ask them, did you talk to so-and-so? Are they on schedule to come and work on the project today? And if they say, yes, I called them. I called them doesn't tell me whether you talked to them or not. It just tells me that you went through an activity. Did you actually get in touch with them? And if you did get in touch with them, did they commit? And if they committed, what time did they commit to? And by driving those kind of questions on a regular basis, I'm helping them to solve the problem of specificity, being able to get somebody to their project on time, on budget. This is how you do it. You eliminate the excuses. You make sure you understand the needs, and you make sure you understand who you're dealing with. You have some subs who they're going to be there on time every day, all day, and you don't have to go through that process with them. But they may not be good managers of their money, and so although they show up, they'll come back the next day. Can you pay me a little bit of something? Let me hold some money for this. Let me do this, and it gets your schedule off. It makes more work for you. And so what you have to do is you have to understand that sub and train them. When you sit down going into it, this is what we're going to do. You're going to have to be able to go from point A to point B so we can turn in a payout. And that's going to come out a week later. And you need to go from point B to point C. And so you go through this process and you train your subcontractors, you train your customers, you train your clients, you train your bankers, and so the whole process that we go through with construction and development and the investments is we go through the whole process where we're identifying who we need and what we need them to do, and then we look for what are the problems that could occur that would prevent them from fulfilling their obligation or commitments to us, and then we seek to solve those issues. And in solving those issues, it makes them successful and thus us successful.
So a lot of what you just mentioned was kind of narrowed towards solving construction and development problems and applying them towards life. A lot of what you just spoke about right now was really dense with a lot of real life case studies and applications in the construction and development arena. And it's going to be interesting trying to break it down into layman's terms for the average person to understand. Because a lot of the examples are really dense on the construction side, and I'll understand them, right? But Dana won't.
So there's a
where I would go, Joe, is it's great, but I feel we can get a little bit more, right? And so now we got a lot that had to deal with your industry, right?
Right.
Now let's see, two things that I noticed that you brought up was you attacked solving problems, of course in order to get paid in the construction and development role, but then you started hitting two types of problems. One of them is being able to have the strategic mental forecasting to be able to forecast future problems and being able to stir them into opportunistic avenues, whether it's personal, it could be personal challenges that you might see. There's someone in your office that might be going a wrong negative route, and then you're seeing it because you've seen it before. So then you try to grab them and steer them the right way, and that, or vice versa on another route. When you started mentioning in business, that had nothing to do with construction, whether it's with your bankers or anybody that you do business with or the people that you pay, and you kind of start seeing those habits, and you got to kind of forecast that and kind of steer them in that. So a lot of what you stated wasn't just solving problems in order to get paid, was also solving and kind of almost being like a gypsy, right? Like being able to kind of foresee problems and being able to turn them towards the right direction and give you the benefit of the doubt in an opportunistic way.
Well, part of it, and I can give you some examples outside of construction, but part of it is it's the mindset of you can be in whatever business you're in. At the end of the day, you have to look for opportunities to solve problems where you're applying your skill set to solve those problems. So you train yourself to look for the problems. And so that's really key in that. It's, for me now, a way of life. So for instance, one of the ladies that works in the office has a daughter that's 12, and she's a straight A student. And she was complaining about the teacher. She said she would never, I was teasing her because she got a 93 in that class. Okay, why didn't you get 100 in this class? And so we're really hashing over the minutia, right? A 93 is an A also. She said, but the teacher is difficult and really doesn't understand. So the teacher's never going to give her an A. So okay, what have you done? Okay, so here's your problem. Your problem is the relationship with the teacher. Right now, it's adversarial. So how do you fix that? Well, one, she doesn't respect the teacher. So, or she has a diminished respect for the teacher. So I said, okay, so why don't you sit down and write your teacher a letter and tell her how she's impacted your life. And she heard me on it, but she wasn't really feeling me.
How old is she?
She's 12.
Oh, wow.
And she heard me, but she wasn't really feeling me because she had developed a distaste for the teacher as well. I said, but that's not your problem. What you got to do is you got to break the stalemate. So for Valentine's Day, the little girl is actually a very good cook, but she made some chocolate covered strawberries, and she took some chocolate covered strawberries to the teacher that she's not very fond of. And so I asked her how that turn out. Well, she said she gave me this great big hug, and and that turned the table. That little gesture turned the table, but more importantly, it showed the little girl how to approach life and how to look at it when you get to that point that appears to be a stalemate. What can you do to make this different? How do you change? How do you identify what the real problem is? So then, when she saw the positive reaction from the teacher, she was more inclined to write the letter. So now she goes back a week later and writes the teacher a letter. And so that whole dynamic, we're only talking about a 93 to a 98 or 99 to the grade wise, but it makes a difference in how they function, how they interact. And that helps her go from a low A to a high A, which was her objective. I didn't ask her to compromise her integrity or say something in the letter that she didn't mean, but you can always find something to compliment them on. The thing I was tell the teacher she's challenged you to do better because she's the only teacher that you haven't made a 100 in her class. So now you've set the table without asking her for 100. You let her know what your goals are. You want 100, not just an A. So she's going to find a way, in most instances, to help you get where you're going if you can eliminate the adversarial nature of that relationship. So that wouldn't have anything to do with construction.
That was great because you just gave an example of solving social dynamic problems. Right? And before you were given examples of solving monetary problems.
Right.
And what I was going to ask you is kind of two examples. One of solving short-term problems to get a short-term reward, and then on the other, solving a long-term problem to get a long-term reward. Now, I want to go a little bit personal, and on the short-term side, it's and that's probably you do that daily, right? So on the daily, you're solving daily problems to get daily rewards. Personally, what was in knowledge management, you have strategic thinking and you have tactical thinking, and in the military, your soldiers have to be tactical and they have to be able to think 2 to 3 weeks down the road. Or how is this decision going to affect me, what I do tomorrow? A strategic thinker is somebody that says, okay, how is this decision going to affect us 3-5 years down the road? Now, can you give some scenarios in your particular life where you got some age with you now? So can you go back to a point where you had the mental fortitude and forecast where you're like, oh my God, if I do this is going to go to this, and if I do this, it's going to go to this, and then you made that decision and it went exactly how you planned 5 to 10 years down the road?
Yes. The best example of that is my wife. My wife is a very independent woman. When I met her, she lived in Washington, D.C., well, actually in Silver Springs, Maryland, and I was in Houston, Texas. And I'd been married before, so I have the wisdom of failure to help me understand or to think through how to manage the relationship better. And that's it. You have to manage it. There's no, I'm going to do this today and I'm going to drop it off and 10 years is going to be in the exact same place. So with my wife, it takes less effort now because we both kind of trained each other to get there. But initially, I spent a lot of time subtly training her on what to do, or training myself on how to keep her happy. Now, I don't believe that it's my job to make her happy or hers to make mine. Everybody has to be responsible for their own happiness ultimately. But I did have to train her and teach her how to win. And so part of that is, again, going back fundamentally, I knew that if she moved to Houston, she would be without her friends, or without her, I'd be taking her out of her environment, out of her social net. So there was a responsibility on my part to help her construct one here. Otherwise, she would be always wanting to get back or lamenting the loss. So I had to always try to make sure that she had outlets that I help her build and foster the kind of environment that she had before. I also had to be strategic in her friends, because when you pull her out of their circle, they're going to miss her and they're going to be wanting to pull her back. Everybody kind of wants to be back at their level, right? Mm-hmm. So I courted my wife. I courted her friends. When we got engaged, I went there and I got her girlfriends to participate in surprising her. I sent a limo to pick her and her closest girlfriend up, and took them both to get spa treatments and to dinner, so that it would be difficult for her to complain about me. So so as we go through our life together, I'm always looking for an opportunity to deposit. My thought process is, every day I want her to make a decision, is this the best place for me? And if she makes that decision every day, I'm going to win out, because I have to be conscious of, she has the right to she's going to make this decision. I don't want her to still be married 12 years after we got married, simply because she did something 12 years ago. I want her to be married today because she still would make the same decision today. And so looking at it like that, long term, I knew that I had to make deposits on a regular basis into her happiness bank, and so that she would be ultimately happy. So it's not expensive, but it requires thought. It's, before you leave the house, because I keep long hours, I'm often gone before they get up and when they come home. So it may be, take a piece of soap and write "I love you" on the mirror. So she's going to see that when she gets up in the morning. Didn't cost me anything, I stopped doing it in her lipstick because she didn't like me wasting her lipstick drawing on the mirror. But you can take a piece of soap and write on the glass. You can take a minute to write a note. When you have strife in a relationship, very rarely is it right and wrong issues. Man, she will not stop robbing those banks. It's not typically that kind of thing. It's typically left and right issues. I would prefer to go this way. You would prefer to go that way. And so I look to solve those problems internally, those things that I can readily identify as just a preference. I then can find a solution that allows her to exercise her preference, even if it's not something that I'm going to participate in. It could be as simple as, we're going to the movies, and I rarely will go to see a movie that I've seen before, so I don't revisit the same movie. So we were going to the movies one day, and she'd seen the movie already, and my son had seen the movie, but it was one that I wanted to see. I think it was Jumanji, and I wanted to see it. And I know my son will watch the same thing 50 times if you let him. So I knew it was not going to be an issue for him. And so she went to the movies saying, okay, well, I'm going to go with y'all. We're going to have a family day and go do this, that, the other. And then she said on the way, we're getting out of the car in the parking lot, she said, now, would you do this for me or something along that line? I said, no, I still wouldn't go to a movie with you again. And initially she was frustrated by my answer. And I'm like, but I didn't tell you to come to this movie with us. I said, this is what I want to see. I'm going to take Zachary because he wants to go. And, you're welcome to come. And so the compromise was, we're in there getting ready to get tickets. And it was another movie that she didn't want to see that was starting at roughly the same time and it ended roughly the same time. So I'm like, I'll buy you tickets. You go see what you want to see. So at the end of the day, we're all happy. We all saw what we wanted to see. And it worked out fine, but it was looking for that compromise. How do I let her do what she wants to do without having to change what I want to do? Because it could have evolved into an argument or a piss and match or whatever, because I'm going to make this sacrifice for you. I'm going to go see this movie again. And so now I want quid pro quo. And I try to keep quid pro quo out of our relationship. I try to make sure that the relationship is based on, make the best decision for you. I'll make the best decision for me. Now, the best decision for me may be to make you happy. And so it may be to acquiesce on this issue, but I can embrace that, and I'm gonna do that as well as I do everything else. And then some of it is I need to be consistent. I know he's not going to do this. There's no point in me getting my hopes up because he's not going to do this in this manner. And that consistency helps long term to keep a relationship balanced. So I think you always have to be looking to see what are the challenges. What are the challenges based on personality types? For instance, Valentine's Day. I don't like standing in line. I'm relatively impatient. And so I don't want to typically go out to eat on Valentine's Day because everybody and their mother's there at the restaurant and it's, poor service and crowded and long waits. And I'm not going to stand in line to go buy flowers on the day because it just takes too much of my time. And so, my wife being the woman that she is would love to have flowers and all these things. But early on, I told her, so look, you can have Valentine's Day or the other 364 days, but you can't have both. I'm not going to get punished by having to stand in line and do all these things if I'm going to show you every day that I love you and I'm going to go out of my way to give you surprises just because it's Tuesday, not because it's based on anything somebody decided for me and that it means something to me. And, while I'm sure that in the back of her mind, she would still love to get a Valentine's Day box of candy or whatever. It works for us because she understands, but it's also because I'm consistent with my messaging. I do stop and do things for her just because I want her to experience it. Right now they're in Utah skiing. It's, hey, these are things, what kind of life do you want to have? Let me help you do the things that you would enjoy. It's, let me go and let me bring dinner home today. I know you were probably going to cook, but let me start. Or better yet, on a weekend, there are times where I've seen her go into the kitchen, getting ready to cook, and we've been doing things all day long. And I stop her and I say, hey, look, you're important. I don't want you to have to cook. I don't want you to have to clean. I don't want you to do anything today. Let me take you out today so that you don't have to do all these other things later. We're going to have a good meal. Everybody eats, and we go on. And so those are those little things that you can do where you solve a problem, solve an issue, or you address something before it becomes that by looking down the road and saying, what are the obstacles to happiness or what are the obstacles to self-sufficiency? It works really across the board.
And I think these are great personal examples, but let's go back. Do you have, and this will be the last question because we're right there on timing, but do you have an example on the business end where you can remember and recall that it was a turning point and you had to make a decision? It was either 50-50 and your conceptual values and norms at that particular time, you made the right decision and you can look back 20 years and be like, oh my God, thank God I did that because if I didn't, X would have happened.
Let me answer that kind of around the corner. I think that ultimately we're the product of every decision that we make. I know that there are times where early on in business, people tell me to use a lot of leverage, use a lot of debt. We'll probably go into that a little later. But I didn't because I felt like I wanted the peace of mind of not having a bunch of obligations. I knew that most entrepreneurs die broke. They always think, I'm going to hit it out of the park, I'm going to hit it out of the park, I'm going to hit it out of the park. And before you know it, they're tired of swinging. And then they never quite hit it out of the park. And so I didn't want to be that guy. So my conservative nature as it relates to doing business, what I do is speculative, but I'm conservative with the profits. I save money. I don't use a lot of credit. I don't leverage my lifestyle. When I used to do inspections, I would tell people that poor people are when I go see different houses, you see a $50,000, $60,000 house, and you see these $500,000 houses. and you look around and you see in the larger houses, you'd almost have to look for the TV. It'd be a TV in this room, but not in every room of the house. But you see books everywhere. And in the lower price houses, back then you didn't have the technology, so TVs were huge. You'd have to almost step in the house sideways to get past the TV. And then you'd have to look for books. They may be off in a closet somewhere or whatever. And so I just kind of noticed that thing about what people, and I realized that a lot of times people are leasing the American dream. They're pretending to have it, so they get these outward displays of wealth, or what they perceive to be wealth, which are expensive cars and jewelry and things that can be visible, the big screen TVs and stuff like that. But they didn't have any real wealth. That's a little off topic, but as it relates to the business, recently I've realized that your dream has to be big enough for your team. I was successful because my dream was big enough for me. And the reason I struggled in business was because the dream was big enough for me. It was imitatable by the people I was trying to get to come to work for me, but it wasn't big enough for them. If you're making $200,000 a year, that's a pretty good lifestyle, even in this country, in terms of income. But you can't get a Hugo and a Dana and a Leonard and a Net to work for $200,000. So if that's as big as it get, what I didn't realize was my team was going to sense that, even if they couldn't identify where the issues were. And so they would always leave them longing for something else, something to do. So everybody was one hand in the business and one hand off, trying to figure out how to acquire their dream. And so I realized that my vision, if I was going to build a team, had to be big enough to allow the whole team to dream and not just go to work. At the $200,000 level, they could only go to work because there wasn't enough room to even exercise their dream. When you look at DCT Capital Fund now, and you have a business that could do a couple $1 million a month, that would accommodate everybody in our office times two, dreaming and trying to get something. There's the everybody's ideal job description could be enhanced to where it's a career move, whether it's, say, Leonard and doing the marketing, the outreach, and raising the capital, to Celine, who wants to do seminars and put on seminars. She can host them on the site. And Annette, who is a very good support person, but in her ideal world, she still needs to make $90,000, $100,000, even in an administrative support role. And so literally yesterday we kind of walked through just here's what it takes to live the life that you want to live, and here's what you need to do to get it, and here's how you can get it. And so there was room inside this building that we have of a company for her to get everything she wants for herself and her children in terms of lifestyle. So that was, I guess, one of the biggest aha moments for me, as I finally understood why I was successful individually but hadn't been successful building a company, is because my vision wasn't big enough. I didn't dream big enough for anybody to really latch on to. There was not a whole technology, internet marketing division. There was no room for that. There wasn't enough capital in it. And so now I look at life again, solving problems, and if I want the best out of Hugo and Hugo's shop, the opportunity that I represent has to be big enough for them to pursue their wildest dreams, help me to get there. So if there aren't any limitations on resources, on opportunities, on funding, on all of those components, then you can give me the very best of what you have, which is what you need to be successful, to build a successful company. So now I'm looking to solve everybody. How can I be your very best client? What can I do to make this the most fun? So it's not just, okay, we're going to meet, but let's meet in New York. Let's meet in New Orleans. Let's meet where, now it's not just you doing your job, but you're having fun doing your job. You're doing it with the people that you enjoy spending time with, and it's not taking you away from, well, if I do this, I can only do this by myself and not with my family. It's how can you make this inclusive? The realtor, Kim, that works in my office, when she comes to work, she's probably the newest member of the team, and that's the one that has the daughter. And I'm saying, how can I make your daughter part of our family? How can I give her something to aspire to? When we start talking about having events in the office, let me give her an opportunity to cater to the event. Yes, she's 12, but she enjoys cooking. She, it's not going to be hot dogs and baked beans. It's going to be some truffle stuffed fruit, souffle of this, that, and the other. So it's how do you solve those problems for people where that problem in dealing with her daughter gives Kim, who's a single mother, a sense of family, a sense of commitment, a sense of I'm not in this by myself. Here's somebody where I work in this office, and it's geared towards me being a good mother. It's geared towards, so she went out. She's an excellent realtor. She ended up listing Leonard's parents' house for sale because Leonard's parents are wanting to move. But she looked at Leonard, who was going to have to his parents have a 5,000 square foot house. And they're going to move into a 2,000 square foot apartment or townhouse or something. So they've got to downsize 3,000 square feet worth of junk and 25 years worth of collections. But Kim took it upon herself to go out there and help Leonard literally get a dumpster and start purging things out of Leonard's parents' house. She was solving his problem, and his parents saw her solving that problem for them. So it made them commit as a client to this real estate company, which is ultimately my real estate company. But so when you start to have a culture of people looking for how do you solve somebody's problem, how do you when you're focused on that part of it, identifying the problems and identifying the needs of other people, you can then the money's going to come. The money's going to follow you because people will readily pay for their problems to be solved. And so you don't have to focus as much on, am I going to have some money today to do this task? We got a call the other day. We had a note that was coming due, and an a long-term client called us and said, hey, look, I've got $100,000 that I have access to. Can you put it to work? He made that phone call because we've been consistent. We've done what we said we're going to do. We've delivered on our promises to him, and we can solve the problem of him putting that money to work and being safe that it's going to come back, that it's going to do. Matter of fact, so when it came down to writing that check, he actually wrote the check for $110,000 so that it would work out to his advantage. But that's where us making sure that we solve the problem of communicating, being transparent, being predictable, doing what we're going to do. Now, everything doesn't work out the way we want it to right off the bat, but because we fulfill our word and our expectations, we have the latitude to make minor adjustments, and it keeps everybody on page and on point. So the thought process of being a problem solver is something we try to teach across the board as you come into the office. You can use it for work, but ultimately work just gets you paid. It's really your experience in life that you're really here for. And so if you can use the lessons that you learn at the office in the field to tweak, fix, correct, modify, enhance your personal life, then you're getting paid twice. You get paid financially, but you also get paid by an easier or more sustainable lifestyle because you're using those same tools to fix your life, to live by.
Now, I hope you enjoyed this episode with Joseph Jackson, the man behind DCT Capital.